In the courtroom, my own mother yelled for everyone to hear. "She's a total disgrace, a mental incompetent who can't handle a dime." I sat there, feeling the heat of her lies and the sting of being publicly humiliated by the woman who was supposed to protect me. It was a shocking moment of family betrayal, a calculated move to strip me of my dignity and my grandmother's legacy. I couldn't believe that her greed had finally pushed her to try and destroy my life in front of a judge. But as she smirked at me, thinking she had finally backstabbed me into a corner, I saw the judge lean forward with a look of intense curiosity. Years of forensic work had taught me to prepare before I ever walked into a room like this, so I simply handed my lawyer a stack of files. The courtroom went dead silent as the judge cleared his throat, leaned into his microphone, and said, "Counsel, we need to address potential fraud in this matter immediately." That single sentence turned my mother's triumphant smile into a mask of pure terror. While the courtroom was still processing that chilling directive, my mother's voice continued to echo through the marble halls like a sharpened blade. She didn't just disagree with my grandmother's will, she aimed for total destruction, looking the judge in the eye while pointing at me. She claimed I was mentally incompetent, a broken woman who couldn't be trusted with a single cent of the family legacy. It was a cold, calculated betrayal that left me feeling completely humiliated and shamed in front of strangers. Watching her lie with such ease was shocking, especially since she was my own flesh and blood, someone who should have protected me. She painted a picture of a daughter who was lost, unstable, and incapable, all to satisfy her greed for the inheritance. I sat there in silence, feeling the weight of her lies pressing down on me, while the courtroom whispered behind my back. It was the ultimate family betrayal, a moment where my self-worth was being auctioned off to the highest bidder. I couldn't believe that a mother could look at her child and try to strip away her dignity just for a bigger piece of the estate. She wanted the world to see me as a victim, a weak girl who needed her guidance, which really meant her control. The family drama was unfolding like a tragic play, and for a second I felt like I was drowning in her venom. But as she kept talking, digging a deeper hole with every word, I felt a spark of something else. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was the beginning of a cold, hard desire for justice. She thought she was winning because I hadn't said a word, assuming my silence was a sign of my supposed incompetence. I was cataloging it all, every false claim, every smirk, and every manipulation she displayed in that room. The shocking truth was that she had completely underestimated the woman I had become while she was busy being absent. I looked at the judge, then at my mother's smug face, and I realized that karma was already in the room, just waiting for its cue. She was so focused on the payback she thought she deserved from her own mother's will that she forgot who was sitting across from her. She saw a daughter she could easily backstab, but I saw a criminal who was about to be caught in her own web. I took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would change everything for her. The air in the courtroom felt heavy, like the moments before a massive storm breaks the heat of a long, cruel summer. My mother leaned back, satisfied with her performance, thinking she had finally secured the wealth she hadn't earned. Little did she know, her infidelity to the truth was about to meet a wall of evidence she never saw coming. As the judge turned his gaze toward me, asking if I had anything to say, I prepared to reveal my secret. My mother sat there with a smirk, convinced she was dealing with the same vulnerable girl she had abandoned years ago. She had no clue that for the last decade, I had built a career far out of her reach, away from her toxic influence. I wasn't just Nancy. I was a senior certified fraud examiner, a specialist in uncovering elder financial abuse and white-collar crime. My life's work was dedicated to finding people exactly like her, the ones who lied and cheated the vulnerable. The irony was almost poetic. She was trying to gaslight a woman who spent 40 hours a week deconstructing complex gaslighting schemes. All those years she spent ignoring my calls and staying out of my life meant she missed the most important detail of my identity. She saw a daughter to be humiliated, but she was actually facing her worst nightmare: a professional hunter of betrayal. My self-worth wasn't tied to her approval. It was rooted in my ability to find the truth. I looked down at my briefcase, which contained more than just legal notes. It contained the blueprint of her downfall and the path to justice. Every time she spoke a lie about my mental state, she was unknowingly giving me more material to use against her in the future. It's funny how karma works when you have the receipts and the professional credentials to back them up. She thought she had backstabbed me into a corner, but I was just waiting for the right moment. I could see the confusion starting to flicker in her eyes as I adjusted my glasses and pulled out a stack of sworn affidavits and bank statements. The courtroom went still as I began to speak, my voice steady, professional, and devoid of the instability she had just described. I wasn't the mentally incompetent girl she portrayed. I was a woman reclaiming her power with clinical precision. This was more than vengeance. It was an audit of her soul, and she was deeply in the red. She had spent so long thinking she was the smartest person in the room, never realizing she was the subject of an investigation. My mother's family betrayal was about to be met with a level of professional scrutiny she couldn't even imagine in her wildest dreams. I couldn't believe how easy she made it for me by being so arrogant, so sure that I was nothing without her. The shocking reality was about to hit her like a freight train, and there was no turning back now. I felt a strange sense of peace as I prepared to lay out the facts of who I really was and what I really did. This wasn't about a daughter's tantrum. It was about an expert witness taking the stand in her own life's most important case. She wanted payback for a life she felt owed her more, but she was about to get a lesson in the high cost of infidelity. As I opened the first file, I knew that the real family drama was only just beginning. To understand why this revenge felt so necessary, you have to understand the hollow silence of the house I grew up in. After the divorce, my mother didn't just leave my father. She effectively discarded me like a piece of old furniture that didn't fit her new life. I was a reminder of a past she wanted to erase, and she made sure I felt the sting of being unwanted every single day. The betrayal of a mother's love is a wound that never quite heals. It just hardens into something else. I was lucky, though, because while my mother was busy chasing her own reflection, my grandmother Dorothy stepped in to save my soul. She was the one who taught me that my self-worth didn't depend on someone who was too blind to see it. Dorothy was my rock, my North Star, the woman who showed me what unconditional love looked like in a world full of lies. Our bond was forged in the quiet moments of baking cookies and her telling me stories of resilience. My mother's absence was a constant, dull ache, but Dorothy's presence was a vibrant, healing light that kept me grounded. She used to tell me that people who cheated their way through life eventually ran out of road, and I listened to every word. She was the one who encouraged me to pursue my career, knowing I had a knack for seeing the things others tried to hide. Because of her, I learned that dignity is something you build, not something you're given. When Dorothy passed away, it felt like the world had lost its color, and in the months that followed, the probate fight turned ugly. The grief was a heavy, suffocating blanket of family drama. But even in her passing, she was looking out for me, leaving me her home and her modest estate as a final act of protection. My mother, who hadn't visited Dorothy in years, suddenly appeared like a vulture circling a fresh kill, smelling the money. Her infidelity to her own mother's memory was the final straw that broke any lingering hope I had for her. Watching her pretend to mourn at the funeral was shocking and humiliated me for ever thinking she could change. She was already calculating the square footage of the house while Dorothy was being lowered into the ground, a true act of vengeance against the dead. She didn't care about the memories or the love. She only cared about the payback she thought she was owed for dealing with us. It was a cold-blooded, backstabbed move that I will never, ever forget or forgive. Now, standing in that courtroom, I was fighting for more than just a house. I was fighting for the legacy of the woman who raised me. My mother wanted to erase Dorothy's wishes and replace them with her own greed-filled narrative, but I wouldn't allow it. I was reclaiming the narrative of my childhood and ensuring that justice was served for the woman who gave me everything. The ghost of Dorothy was right there with me, and she had kept the receipts for every tear I ever shed. The legal battle took a dark, sinister turn when my mother's lawyer produced a stack of papers that made my blood run cold. They weren't just financial documents. They were my private therapy records, obtained through a subpoena my mother had quietly pushed through weeks earlier, twisted to look like proof of instability. My mother had dug through my most vulnerable moments, weaponizing my past struggles to prove I was unfit. It was a calculated betrayal designed to destroy my career. I couldn't believe the lengths she would go to, effectively trying to gaslight the entire legal system into seeing me as a broken woman. She whispered to her lawyer, pointing and nodding, as they detailed episodes that were actually just a teenager grieving a mother who didn't want her. This wasn't just a probate case anymore. It was an all-out war on my reputation and my very sense of self-worth. She wanted me shamed and jobless, left with nothing but the care she intended to exploit. The family betrayal was now public, and I could see the judgmental looks from the court staff and the spectators in the gallery. She was painting me as a ticking time bomb, someone who couldn't be trusted with the burden of a large inheritance or a professional license. It was a masterclass in infidelity to the truth, a web of lies spun with the intent to leave me utterly powerless. She was trying to use the law as a weapon of vengeance for her own perceived slights. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized she was trying to take away the one thing I had worked so hard to build, my professional dignity. If the board saw these allegations, my license as a fraud examiner could be suspended or revoked before I even had a chance to fight back. She was backstabbed me in the most public way possible, hoping the pressure would make me fold and hand over everything. But she forgot one thing. I knew how to analyze a crime scene, and she was leaving fingerprints everywhere. The shocking cruelty of a mother trying to ruin her daughter's livelihood just for a payday was almost too much to process in the moment. She wanted payback for all the years I spent with Dorothy, jealous of the love she was too selfish to provide herself. The family drama had reached a fever pitch, and the courtroom felt like a shark tank where I was the only bait. But I stayed still, breathing through the panic, and started looking for the cracks in her polished facade. As they finished their presentation, my mother gave me a look of pure, triumphant malice, thinking she had finally won. She thought the justice system would fold under her dramatic performance and her manufactured evidence. What she didn't realize was that by opening this door, she had invited me to walk right through it and examine her own records. The game of lies was about to get a lot more complicated for her, and I was ready to play. The fallout from the courtroom drama hit me harder than I ever expected, turning my professional life into a nightmare. Over the next few weeks, the mentally incompetent labels reached my firm, and I was pulled from all active investigations and benched. My boss, a man I had respected for years, looked at me with a mix of pity and suspicion that made me feel utterly humiliated. My self-worth was taking hits from every direction, and I felt like the ground was dissolving beneath my feet. It wasn't just work. The poison of my mother's lies started to seep into my personal life, affecting the people I trusted most. My boyfriend, Mark, started asking gentle questions about my history that felt like accusations, his eyes filled with a new, haunting doubt. I couldn't believe how quickly the life I had built was crumbling just because a toxic woman decided to play a role in court. The betrayal was no longer just about money. It was about the total isolation she was forcing upon me. Socially, I became a pariah, with friends suddenly becoming too busy to grab coffee or return my calls as the rumors spread. The family betrayal had become a public spectacle, and people loved to watch a high-flyer fall, especially when the story involves mental instability. I was being shamed by association with a narrative I hadn't even written, feeling the cold sting of vengeance every time I saw a whisper. My dignity was being stripped away layer by layer, leaving me exposed and alone. I spent nights staring at the ceiling of Dorothy's house, wondering if my mother had finally succeeded in breaking me. The family drama was suffocating, and the injustice of it all felt like a physical weight on my chest that I couldn't shake. I was being punished for being a victim of her neglect, then punished again for the sin of surviving it. It felt like justice was a fairy tale told to children, while the real world was ruled by whoever could tell the loudest lie. But then I remembered Dorothy's voice telling me that the truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. It just needs to exist. My mother thought she was winning because she had destroyed my present, but she didn't realize she was fueling my fire for the future. I stopped crying and started thinking like the fraud examiner I was trained to be, looking at the situation as a case study. If she wanted to play dirty, I would show her that I was the one who knew where all the dirt was buried. I began a silent investigation from my home office, using credentials I still legally retained as a certified examiner. Mostly public records, banking anomalies, and digital breadcrumbs, enough to build probable cause and see what skeletons were hiding in her closet. The payback wasn't going to be a scream. It was going to be a silent, devastating strike that she would never see coming. The shocking discoveries I was about to make would change the game entirely. Working from the shadows of my grandmother's study, I began to peel back the layers of my mother's life like a professional surgeon. I used my access to forensic databases and my knowledge of hidden assets to trace every cent she and my stepfather had touched. What I found wasn't just messy. It was a systematic, cold-blooded pattern of infidelity to the law and to Dorothy herself. The shocking truth was that they had been draining Dorothy's accounts long before she ever took her last breath. I uncovered a series of suspicious cash withdrawals, all made at times when Dorothy was hospitalized and unable to leave her bed. There were forged power of attorney documents, signatures that didn't match the pressure patterns and stroke rhythm of her known signatures. My mother had been cheated her own mother out of her life savings while pretending to be the concerned daughter who was nowhere to be found. This wasn't just a family betrayal. It was a felony in progress, and I was documenting every single step. The more I dug, the more the truth began to reveal a level of greed that made my skin crawl with disgust. They hadn't just taken money. They had manipulated legal documents to ensure they would eventually own everything Dorothy worked for. I couldn't believe they were bold enough to commit such blatant fraud while simultaneously trying to label me as the unstable one. It was a classic case of projection, a smokescreen of lies designed to hide their own criminal tracks from the world. Every forged document I found felt like a piece of justice falling into place. A silent promise to Dorothy that I would fix this. My self-worth began to return, not because of what people thought of me, but because I knew I was doing the right thing. I was reclaiming my power by being smarter, faster, and more meticulous than the people who tried to destroy me. The vengeance I was seeking was no longer personal. It was professional, cold, and absolutely necessary for the balance of things. I found a hidden digital trail of wire transfers to offshore accounts, a single routing number kept repeating like a fingerprint. It was a sophisticated scheme, but they had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated a daughter who had been raised to keep receipts. They thought I was a broken girl, but I was a forensic examiner with a mission and a very long memory. The payback was going to be more than just a court victory. It was going to be a total systemic collapse for them. As the sun began to rise on the third day of my investigation, I found the holy grail of evidence that would end them both. It was a series of emails where they openly discussed how to deal with me and Dorothy to get the estate. I sat back in Dorothy's chair, feeling her presence in the room, and I knew that karma was finally ready to make its appearance. But I needed one more thing to make the case bulletproof, something only Dorothy could provide from beyond the grave. I was cleaning out the secret compartment in Dorothy's old mahogany desk when I felt it. A small, leather-bound book tucked behind a false panel. It was her journal, a detailed daily account of the final 2 years of her life, and it was a devastating record of betrayal. In her elegant, shaky script, Dorothy had documented every visit from my mother, every borrowed sum of money, and every threat. The shocking reality of her fear and her strength poured off the pages, breaking my heart all over again. Dorothy knew what was happening, but she was too frail to fight back openly, so she did the only thing she could. She kept a record. She wrote about the days my mother would come over and scream at her to change the will, calling her senile and useless. The family betrayal was laid bare in ink, a mother's lies and a daughter's greed exposed in the most intimate way possible. I couldn't believe Dorothy had carried this burden alone, protecting me from the truth even as she was being exploited. The journal became the emotional and legal backbone of my entire case, a voice from the grave demanding justice. It detailed how my stepfather had forced her to sign papers she didn't understand, and how they had cheated her out of her peace of mind. Every entry was a testament to her dignity and a condemnation of their cruelty, providing the context that the bank records couldn't show. This was the ultimate payback, written by the woman they thought they had silenced forever. Reading her words, I felt a surge of vengeance that was pure and focused, a white-hot flame that burned away my remaining self-doubt. Dorothy had seen the backstabbed moves coming and had left me the tools to finish the fight she couldn't win on her own. My self-worth was now tied to her legacy, and I swore that I would not let her down, no matter what it cost me. The family drama was about to reach its final explosive act, and I was the one holding the script. The journal even mentioned me, saying she knew I was the only one who could find the truth once she was gone. It was a final, beautiful validation that Dorothy believed in me even when my own mother was trying to tear me down. I realized then that reclaiming her estate wasn't about the money. It was about honoring the woman who saved my life. The shocking evidence in those pages was going to be the undoing of two people who thought they were above the law. I packed the journal away safely, knowing it was the most valuable thing in the world, far more precious than the gold or the house. With the financial records and Dorothy's own testimony, the case was no longer just my word against theirs. It was a mountain of undeniable fact. I felt a cold, calm sense of anticipation as I prepared for the next step. I knew the weakest link would eventually crack, but I didn't expect it to be that very night. The knock on my door at midnight was hesitant, almost fearful, and when I opened it, I found my stepsister, Chloe, standing there in the rain. She looked like a shell of the person I remembered, her eyes darting around as if she were being followed. We had never been close. My mother made sure of that. But the look on her face was one of pure, unadulterated betrayal. She walked in, sat at my kitchen table, and started to cry, saying she couldn't live with the lies anymore. Chloe confessed that she had been watching our father and my mother orchestrate the entire scheme for months, and the guilt was eating her alive. She described a long pattern of financial abuse that didn't just target Dorothy, but had been their business model for years. I couldn't believe that even her own husband, my stepfather, was part of a larger web of infidelity and fraud that went back decades. This wasn't just about one estate. It was a criminal enterprise built on family betrayal. She revealed that they were already planning to sell the house and move the money overseas the moment I was declared incompetent by the court. The shocking depth of their cruelty was even worse than I had imagined. A total lack of empathy for anyone who stood in their way. Chloe agreed to testify, providing the inside information that would link the forged documents directly to my mother's computer. This was the justice I needed, coming from the person they least expected to turn on them. Seeing Chloe's fear made me realize that I wasn't the only victim of their vengeance. They had poisoned everyone around them. My self-worth was reinforced by her courage to come forward, reminding me that the truth always finds a way out, eventually. We spent the night going over her timeline and matching it with my forensic evidence, building a case that was absolutely airtight. The family drama was shifting, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting this war alone. Chloe's testimony would be the final nail in the coffin, the human element that would make the judge see the monsters behind the masks. My mother had backstabbed me, but she had also backstabbed the daughter she actually kept, never thinking she'd have a conscience. It was a poetic form of karma, a betrayal of a betrayal that was finally tipping the scales in my favor. I felt a grim satisfaction knowing that their overconfidence was about to be their greatest downfall. As Chloe left, she hugged me and whispered that she was sorry for everything, a moment of genuine connection I never thought possible. The payback was gathering momentum, a silent tidal wave that was about to crash over my mother's world and wash away her lies. I was ready for the depositions, ready to play the part they expected of me until the very last second. The stage was set, and the mentally incompetent girl, was about to give the performance of a lifetime. The day of the depositions arrived, and I walked into the law office, looking every bit the broken and unstable woman they wanted me to be. I wore a sweater that was slightly too large, kept my head down, and let my hands tremble just enough to be noticed. My mother sat across from me, her eyes gleaming with a predatory satisfaction as she watched me struggle to answer basic questions. She thought she had already won, and her arrogance was the intoxicating scent in the room, a sign of her impending payback. I gave vague, rambling answers, pretending to be confused by the financial documents they threw in front of me, playing into their narrative of family betrayal. Every time I tripped over a word, my mother would smirk at her lawyer, clearly thinking I was as mentally incompetent as she'd claimed. I couldn't believe how easy it was to manipulate them by simply reflecting their own biased expectations back at them. They were so blinded by their own vengeance that they couldn't see the trap I was laying. Behind my vacant expression, the court reporter was capturing every word, and I was watching every reaction as they grew more and more overconfident. They started talking more freely, dropping details about their plans that they never would have shared if they thought I was a threat. It was a masterclass in forensic psychology, letting the criminals feel safe so they'd provide the evidence of their own infidelity. My dignity was hidden, but my intellect was sharper than it had ever been in my entire life. My stepfather even made a joke about Dorothy's confusion, laughing as if her suffering was just a funny anecdote in their quest for wealth. The shocking lack of remorse in that room was all the fuel I needed to keep the act going until the very end. I felt humiliated for them, for their smallness and their greed, but I didn't let a single flicker of it show on my face. They thought they were the ones in control of the family drama, but I was the one holding the remote. By the end of the day, they were convinced that the upcoming trial would be a mere formality before they took everything I had left. They walked out of that office laughing, leaving me sitting there like a discarded shell, thinking they had backstabbed me into oblivion. But as soon as the door closed, I straightened my back, wiped the confusion from my eyes, and looked at my lawyer. We had it all: the arrogance, the admissions, and the absolute proof of their malicious intent for justice. The weak girl they saw in that room was a phantom, a ghost of their own making, while the real me was already 10 steps ahead of them. The reclaiming of my life was almost complete, and the next time they saw me, I wouldn't be playing a part. I was going to be the storm that took everything from them, the one who brought the hammer of the truth down on their heads. The trial was only days away, and I had never felt more ready to settle the score. When the final hearing began, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric, with my mother sitting in the front row, wearing a celebratory smile. She expected another day of my incompetence, but when my attorney stood up, the tone of the room shifted from drama to a surgical strike. We didn't lead with feelings. We led with a mountain of forensic bank records that showed a systematic draining of Dorothy's estate. The shocking silence that fell over the room as the numbers appeared on the screen was the first sign that justice had arrived. My attorney presented the forged power of attorney documents alongside Dorothy's actual medical records, proving she was incapable of signing anything. Then came the Holy Grail: Dorothy's journal, read aloud in a steady voice that brought the cold reality of her abuse to life. My mother's smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer panicked terror as her lies were dismantled piece by piece in front of the judge. The family betrayal was no longer a secret. It was a documented criminal conspiracy for the world to see. Then, the ultimate blow. My stepsister Chloe took the stand, her voice shaking but clear as she detailed every conversation and every crime she'd witnessed. I couldn't believe how quickly my mother's face turned a ghostly pale as the woman she thought she controlled became the voice of the truth. The infidelity to her family, her mother, and the law was laid bare, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. The payback was happening in real time, and it was more devastating than any scream could ever be. I watched as the judge's expression turned from neutral to one of cold, hard fury as the evidence of elder exploitation became undeniable. My mother tried to interrupt, to scream that it was all a lie, but she was quickly silenced by the weight of the paper trail I had built. She was being humiliated by the very daughter she tried to shame. her reputation crumbling in the place she sought to destroy mine. It was the ultimate reclaiming of my self-worth, standing tall while she shrank into her seat. As court-martials, followed by federal agents already waiting outside, entered the back of the courtroom, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about the total, absolute vindication of a life they tried to erase. The judge didn't hold back, his voice booming as he detailed the calculated cruelty and profound greed displayed by my mother and stepfather. He immediately ordered their detention pending referral and warrants already in motion. Watching them being led away in handcuffs was a moment of shocking finality, a definitive end to the years of betrayal. They were no longer the powerful architects of my misery. They were just two criminals facing the high price of their lies. The following months saw them both convicted of multiple counts of wire fraud and elder exploitation. The court ordered full restitution, ensuring that Dorothy's estate was returned to its rightful state and that her wishes were finally honored. I eventually reconciled with Mark on new terms built on radical honesty and a deeper understanding of what loyalty actually means. The restitution allowed me to clear my name professionally, and I now lead a task force dedicated to preventing the kind of family betrayal that almost destroyed me. My dignity was not just restored, it was elevated. Standing on the porch of Dorothy's house tonight, I feel a deep connection to the woman who raised me, knowing the truth always wins in the end. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hide the darkest secrets. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that felt like it was going to break you? Or have you witnessed karma finally catching up to someone who thought they were untouchable? I want to hear your thoughts. Was my vengeance a fair act of justice? Drop a comment below and let's start a conversation. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to subscribe and hit those notifications. We're diving into more shocking stories of resilience every week. Keep your receipts, stay sharp, and always remember that your silence is only temporary.